I'm Cindy Kelly, Atomic Heritage Foundation. It is Tuesday, October 17, 2017, and I am in Santa Fe with Mary Brennan. And my first question for Mary is to say her full name and spell it.
I'm Mary Brennan. That's Brennan.
Great. Do you have a middle name?
I use Gottschalk, Godschalx, Mary Gottschalk Brennan.
Great. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. And we are here in this wonderful house that Dorothy McKibbin built. Can you start by telling us something about Dorothy McKibbin, who she was?
Well, Dorothy was a Midwestern girl who had the great fortune to go to Smith College. And she graduated from Smith. And she was the daughter of a lawyer from Kansas City, very privileged. And she enjoyed traveling. And she told me that she had, during the World War I, that she had several boyfriends that she had lost. And so she had a kind of an independent life until she got married when she was 27. And she married Joseph McKibbin, who had been a stockbroker in New York City. He had decided to go back to work in Minnesota. And Dorothy was engaged to him. She contracted tuberculosis. And she broke off the engagement, and she came here to Santa Fe, to the Sunmount Sanitarium. And she was there for 1 year. In that period, she just really fell in love with the culture, the Indian culture, the Spanish culture of New Mexico. And this house, which replicates a rural New Mexico farm home, is an example of her aesthetic and an example of her great love of New Mexico. She was interested in Spanish colonial arts. She worked in a store downtown and for a while as a bookkeeper, and she collected the doors that are in this house, and she collected the vigas and the corbels and all the wood pieces that you see on the portals. And she then proceeded to build the house with the assistance or the design work of Catherine Stinson Otero. And that's another really long story, but it's really is part of the history of this house. So anyway, Dorothy built this house for about $10,000. It's in a little notebook of hers, to the great disapproval of her family, because they expected her, after her husband died, they were married 3 years, and he died of Hodgkin's disease. They expected her to resume her lifestyle in Kansas City. They were going to change the 3rd floor ballroom into an apartment for her and Kevin, our son. And I envision this woman going, "I'm out of here. I want to be independent. I want to go back to New Mexico." So she set up life here to be on her own. So the house, we'll have to go back and find that date. There's a 38, I think. She continued to work, and then she met Oppenheimer downtown at the La Fonda Hotel. Somebody introduced her to him, and the person said, "This is a lady that you would want to work for you." And she was just so enamored with the way Oppenheimer looked, and she talks about his eyes, and how she felt like, I think, that he was a ballroom dancer. He was just light on his feet, just quite glamorous, I think. And so she went to work for him. And during the project years, this house became a venue for their parties. They had 30 weddings here because, these were strangers in a town of about 12,000 people, so they would really stick out. So they came here. And this is the story that I love, and I heard it from a woman who got married here. And Priscilla Duffield, who was Oppenheimer's secretary. The bride would get dressed in Dorothy's bedroom. She would crawl through on her hands and knees through the window to the front portal, and then she'd meet Oppenheimer outside, and Oppenheimer would escort her into this room in front of the fireplace where they would get married. And then the house would be stripped of all its furniture. The sofas and everything would be put out in the yard, and they would party. They'd dance and there is some footage of a wedding at that time. And so when Dorothy's granddaughter Karen got married, we reenacted that. She came through the window, and her dad met her on the front porch, and escorted her to the altar, to the fireplace. And we think Dorothy would have approved of that. Dorothy always gave people a little tour of the house, and she would say, this is what she told me. She told me that when she built the house, she took a stick, and they outlined what they wanted the shape of the house to be in the dirt. And then she brought in the local workers to build her an adobe house. After she died, and I was in her papers, we found the blueprints. The blueprints were drawn up by Catherine Stinson Otero. She flew airmail. She flew flying demonstrations in the court of Japan and the court of China. And when she tried to volunteer to fly combat in World War I, they turned her away. She contracted tuberculosis. She ended up at Sunmount. She married the son of one of our governors and went into the house designing business, replicating Spanish colonial housing. So Dorothy and Catherine really collaborated on developing this house. With Dorothy's collections of wood, doors, and materials, this house basically grew out of the earth. There is a book called, I'm sorry, I can't remember the title, of Earth and Timbers. There's a book called Earth and Timbers, and that's what these houses are built out of. They're built of earth, adobe, and they're built of timbers. The pine, the wood, the aspen from the mountains, surrounding mountains. And the other thing, when Dorothy brought you in, she would say she drew the outline of the house in the dirt. She would say that this was built on a crawl space, and she'd stand right where we're sitting and bang her foot on the ground and say, "This is such a well-built house, this floor won't even crack." And then she would take you into the bathroom and she'd show you the back side of the door because of the way the workman or the artisan had had designed and used all the wood to build a complete door. So Dorothy was married in 1927, and she was a widow by 1930. And she had a little baby boy named Kevin. And she was absolutely devoted to him. And so she has this little child, and she brings him here, and this is the house he grew up in. He had a great time here, and he had wonderful memories growing up here. And one of the stories he told me was that he was with a friend in the house, his mother was gone, and the two boys started batting an orange around his bedroom. And he realized there were these orange spots on the wall from the orange, and he was just petrified. But she came home and she said, "Oh, honey, it's okay." And all the walls were finished in calcimine, which is whitewash. And she just covered them up, and everything was all right. She didn't yell at him. He had this menagerie. He had dogs. He had a tank out back that he kept his snakes in. There was a famous artist in town named Katie Wells. Katie Wells built Kevin a turtle compound. And the turtle summered up here, and then wintered down near El Castillo downtown, where there was a greenhouse. So it was I think they must have had just a great time together. Dorothy loved to hike. She liked sports, so he enjoyed the outdoors, and he always had a love for the outdoors. I think that's one of the really nice things that they shared with each other. Kevin became a ranger at Bandelier and worked for the Forest Service, the Park Service. The other story, now this is, I read this in an article from a magazine from the Los Alamos Historic Society or something, in an interview that Dorothy gave, that after the bomb was dropped, the scientists that were involved in the project gathered here for like an all-day conference. Some of them came up from Washington, and some of them were from the Hill. And that the Fermi Institute was founded in this house because they decided that this would be an ideal thing to happen, that they would get together and have a think tank having to do with atomic development. I think you might want to check on that. I don't know how true that story is, but it's something that I came across in reading about Dorothy. During the project, as I said, they would party up here because they weren't allowed into town. And Kevin would talk about how he had to have to go sleep in an automobile out in the back because the party was lasting so late and he needed his sleep. And he said, I don't think they wanted a kid around anyway. From what I understand, there were few scientists that were allowed into downtown. They went to the bar at La Fonda. There's a story that is told that they were trying to spread some rumors about what was happening up at the project, and they said that they were developing windshield wipers for submarines. And they said that nobody at the bar or anybody in the hotel would have cared. They just wasted their breath. They were just kind of like, yeah, we really know what's going up there, or we don't care what's going up there, or let's see, I'm trying to think. So as I said, I'm thinking, or my impression is that only a limited number of people were allowed downtown. And that they came up here for their celebrations and their parties, and to get off the hill, so to speak. And then, one of the things about Dorothy, she was very motherly. She had just had a really warm personality. So she became, because she was the first contact person they had when they came off the train at Lamy, she gave them their ration tickets, their billet. She arranged for transportation. She became like a mother to them. And their babies weren't really officially born at Los Alamos. They were born in Dorothy's mailbox down on 109 East Palace. And so there are some birth certificates that have that address on it. But she really took care of these ladies. And she was very, very compassionate. She was very discreet. That's one of the things that people admired about her so much, and I've heard that from many people. She was very circumspect. They always describe her as the lady that could keep a secret. In my brief encounter with her, I never heard her really denigrate anybody. Dorothy was very positive about people, but the only person I really heard her be negative about would be Edward Teller. And that was because of his role in depriving Robert Oppenheimer of his security clearance. And that was a blow to everybody, and it remained something that people were very upset with in this area, even to the time I came in the early 80s. The other interesting thing, and this was my experience, was that in the early 80s, when Kurt and I first got here, that the people that worked at the project continued to come through, continued to visit her. And it was like they were coming back to relive those good times they had in this house. And she'd always have, put out drinks for them, and they'd socialize. And she was well loved. I mean, and remembered. She was born in 1897. I can't remember, it was in December of 1897. Dorothy was a voracious reader. She really, really loved her books. She knew a great deal of very famous people. May Sarton was a good friend of hers, poet May Sarton. From what I understand, that during the war and after the bomb was dropped, that officials from Washington would come into Santa Fe, and scientists from Los Alamos would come down the hill, and they would meet here in this house so they could be private and discuss the issues revolving around the creation of the bomb and probably what they were going to do in the post-war period. When you live here, you encounter all the Spanish colonial art, the Indian art, and the Anglo history of the area. And one of the incredible things about Dorothy was that she, because of her experience at the Sunmount Sanitarium, she met really prominent New Mexico artists like Katie Wells and people who were working in the arts. In addition, she was collecting Indian pottery and Spanish colonial art. And her exposure to that came about by her stay at the sanitarium at Sunmount. The Sunmount was run by the Mira brothers, and one was a physician who was helping cure people of tuberculosis, and the other was his brother, who was an anthropologist. And in order to entertain their patients and to keep them going, they would lecture them on art. They would expose them to the Indian Pueblo dances. They would take them out on excursions. And so many of them stayed here because they loved the area. And that would be like Canthra Stinson Otero, who was the aviatrix, later house designer, and John Galmeen, the architect. But that basically formed her love for this culture. And she had such an inquisitive mind. She just loved all of it. And when I first met her, she just couldn't, she was so eager to get Kurt and I out into New Mexico, to the dances, to the fairs, to the mountains. She just loved it all. So I think too that she probably, when she met these young people coming from the East for the project, she was there to help entertain them and to expose them to some of the things that were happening here.
So by the time she started working on the project with Oppenheimer, she had been living here about 10 years, is that right?
Yeah, easily, yeah. And
how did that help her in her job of housing early on, for example?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. You know, Dorothy was a doer. She's one of these people who could take charge and get things done. She just was. And so if you said to Dorothy, you get housing for these people, she'd say fine. And she would figure out where the billets were and she would slot them in. If they needed ration tickets, if their babies needed medicine, if their babies needed doctors, she knew where to go, she knew who to contact. She was like the entree into Santa Fe for this group of strangers. I think that's what you can see, how indispensable she was to the project in terms of just kind of being this, I hate to say mother figure because she was not that old, she was in her 40s, but when she was at Smith, she was known as a power girl. She was known as being a very capable person. And it just transferred all through her life. You could see it when she was managing me, when I first came into Santa Fe, is you're going to go up to St. John's and you're going to take a seminar. You know, it's just the way she was. And she had a great sense of humor. She could laugh easily. And she enjoyed people. And
what a twist of fate. And many, many sad things happening. First going to the sanatorium and then losing her husband.
She lost her sister to tuberculosis.
Go ahead.
About 2-3 years before Dorothy came here, her sister Frances died of tuberculosis. So the family was very panicked when Dorothy contracted it. And I don't know who made the decision to send her to Santa Fe or how they knew about Santa Fe, but she came as a young woman, and she really, really fell in love with it, with the community. Dorothy fell in love with Santa Fe, and after her husband Joseph died, she decided that this was going to be where she was going to live. And I think she had gone what you call native. She didn't want to be the lady who had to put a hat on and wear white gloves and serve tea. She was looking for a new life. And Santa Fe had that informality. It also had a great culture. She had friends here already because of her stay at the Sun Mount. I think one of the most telling things I've ever discovered about Dorothy was after she died, I helped Mary McKibbin empty the house. And in the back closet were all of Dorothy's wedding gifts from 1927. There was Limoges china. There was pink French crystal. It was all in its original wrappings. It had never been used. In the closets was Black Maria pottery. Maria was a very famous potter from San Ildefonso. Dorothy had a dinner set made by Maria. So you could just see how there was this transition from a Victorian past, upper class, well-to-do, to coming to Santa Fe. And there's a marvelous picture of Dorothy's father standing on the front porch with the biggest frown on his face. He just looked so disapproving of her. But look what she accomplished. She had this fabulous house, and she knew what she wanted. And she did it. And she did it at a time that was difficult because it was right during the Depression or at the aftermath of the Depression. And she was making her own living. She was making her way.
A single mother.
Yeah. Well, but you could tell they were ready to run her life. You're going to live in this apartment. We're going to build for you, and we'll take care of you. I know. Yeah. A lot of life lessons there.